Hey y'all, so today we're going to talk about witchcraft once again, and we're going to talk about it, how it shows up emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, situationally. I probably touched on all these points in my We Need to Talk About Witchcraft videos, but I think I did more of like just a few examples, and then I did like a story time afterwards. This time I'm going to do a lot more examples and no story time. So, first, one of the most common ways in which witchcraft shows itself is mentally. At its core, witchcraft is manipulation. And when someone wants to perform witchcraft on someone, mentally is where they are affected the most. Now, it's important to know that I've talked about this so many times before, but it's important to note that when we think of witchcraft, we often think of that person who's like standing over a cauldron, saying chants and stuff like that. But witchcraft is in our everyday language. Literally, like the term spelling comes from the idea of like putting a spell on someone. When you are speaking your mind about something, more often than not, you're trying to convince someone else of your truth. There's nothing wrong with that in theory, but it can very easily be manipulative. That's where manipulation comes from, right? It's you see it one way, well, I see it this way, and you need to see it the way that I see it. Biblically, I always like to think of that verse that's I'm really bad at references, forgive me, but Jesus is speaking, I think it's in Matthew, and he says something like, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything in between is of the evil one. When we're not careful with our words, we invite the trap of manipulation to be our portion. It is very, very easy to be manipulative. There are some people who obviously like that's their personality trait and they're like trying to get something from people all the time. And then there's just our everyday, like, I don't know, you have an opinion about something, especially like with politics. That's a really strong one. But you have an opinion on something, I have an opinion on something, and I'm not really okay with your opinion, so I'm gonna try and like convince you why you need to abandon your ideas and take on mine. That actually is manipulation, unless it's like invited or something like that. Already manipulation, and already the foundation of what witchcraft looks like. I don't like how someone is saying something, how someone sees something, so I'm going to manipulate or change it so that it reflects what I want to see. It's a favorable word or outcome or situation or whatever in my eyes. So anyways, that's witchcraft in a nutshell. So it affects people a lot, obviously, verbally, I guess you could say, / mentally, both. But I'm going to look more at like when it's done to you, not so much like everyday situations. Actually, in the series that I did, I talk about that, how it can look in everyday language. So if you want to know more about that, you can watch those videos. But we're talking about it being done to you, how it can show up mentally. Racing thoughts, anxiety. So many times I have experienced this one where I have a thought, and it feels overwhelmingly negative, and it starts to feel like I'm drowning because it's just one negative thought after another. And sometimes it can be a spirit speaking. but oftentimes it's witchcraft. Often, I was thinking about this recently, that when trying to determine the difference, because you do need to know the difference if you're going to fight against it. Otherwise, it'll just continue. When the thoughts mirror your own like way of thinking, thoughts you yourself have had, like deep down you feel this way, or you've considered feeling this way. I'll just say like towards some situation, okay? Could be a person, could be a number of things, could be yourself. In my experience, I have found that if I'm having all these thoughts come up that I've already had, it is oftentimes I'm dealing with witchcraft versus a spirit that will be inflicting ideas on me, if that makes sense. The only sense I can make of that is that you're dealing with like a separate entity, a separate person, versus witchcraft. So that is one of the ways you can tell, because it can feel and look very, very, very similar. If a spirit starts speaking to you, it will also feel very negative, and it can also feel like back to back to back thoughts and all this kind of stuff. But I have found that normally it feels like, oh my gosh, like, where are these thoughts kind of coming from? Now, it depends. It depends on your situation. But that's my experience. But anyway, so lots and lots of thoughts could be a sign of witchcraft. Anxiety could be a sign of witchcraft. Fear, closely related to anxiety, could be a sign of witchcraft. If you struggle with fear, because some people like live in fear, witchcraft. I'm not saying like automatically that that's what it is, but it very well could be. Forgetfulness. I actually remember someone sharing a testimony of their time when they were like a warlock, and then they converted to Christianity, and he was talking about how he would like mess with people's memories and stuff like that, and like make them feel like they were crazy. And he said that if you are starting to realize like your memory is kind of randomly seeming to just not be what it used to be, it could be a sign of being manipulated by witchcraft. Obviously, that alone may not be anything. Could just be, you need to take more omega-3s or something, but it could be that. Brain fog as well can also be a sign mentally that you're dealing with witchcraft. One important thing to remember that I probably should have started with is that as children of God, we have power and authority over all of this. Unless you're really, really, really afflicted, where you might need some help being delivered, we have power and authority over this. I'm a testament to this, but there are plenty of other people who are as well. You can rebuke that spirit if you're dealing with a spirit. You can rebuke witchcraft if you're dealing with witchcraft, and get that power to cease in Jesus' name. It's absolutely a thing that you can do. I remember when I was younger and I'd hear about like witchcraft and stuff, it'd be like so scary, and it's like, oh my gosh, what is this, blah blah blah. And to a degree it is kind of scary because people are so evil. You realize like, wow, people really, really like the idea of control and some of the stuff that you hear, oh my gosh. And the idea of being like their own God, even if they themselves can't admit it. But we have power and authority over that. So come against that if it's afflicting you. Do not think that you're powerless. So those are some of the signs mentally. I feel like the racing thoughts one is a really important one, because I know a lot of people experience that and they just think it's them. You might like be a little concerned if your memory just starts to go, or you have brain fog or something like that, but or you're in fear randomly. But with the racing thoughts, a lot of people just think that that's them. It's not just you. It's important to take captive every thought that exalts itself above the things of Christ, but to also examine, where are these thoughts coming from? Are they pushing you more towards Christ or away, more towards fear, more towards, being edified spiritually or not, or whatever. Anyways, so those are some ways in which witchcraft can show up mentally. Emotionally, witchcraft can show up in anger, especially if we're talking about like unprovoked, or like maybe not necessarily unprovoked, but like your level of anger doesn't match like the situation, if that makes sense. So like you drop something and then you're ready to like set the whole house on fire or something like that, So anger is a way in which you can be manipulated by witchcraft. And this also obviously applies to other people. Like if you're dealing with someone that, is often angry or has anger issues, there's a potential that they could be under attack. Irritation. I shared this in my other videos, a story of me just feeling so incredibly irritated that it actually seemed to manifest physically. Like it was almost as if I was like itchy or something like that, though it was a really weird experience. I can't really like explain it very well, but it manifested like I was like itchy. And I just felt an overwhelming irritation. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Like, why am I bothered? And I had to like honestly take a step back and away from people. And that's the thing about witchcraft that gets people, is that if you don't know that someone is working behind the scenes for whatever reason, you carry something, and what am I trying to say? Like, especially for people of God, although it's important to note that witchcraft can affect even those in the world too. But for those of God, you carry something and you're supposed to do something for God. You're supposed to, what am I trying to say? You're trying to walk the path of righteousness. The enemy doesn't like that, so they'll throw anything that they can at you. Anyways, but I was fortunate that I was able to even question where this irritation was coming from and not just react. That's what gets people in trouble, is that we often as human beings, since we don't see the spiritual, we just think, okay, I this thought is in my mind, so it's my thought, so it must be true, so blah blah blah, instead of examining, where is this coming from? And I get it, like, why would we? But we should. We absolutely should. This falls under the category of that verse that says, take captive every thought, or some translations say imagination, that exalts itself above the things of Christ. It is so, 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 so important. And by the way, if you do that, if you practice that, I promise before God, your mind will become so much clearer. So much clearer. You will not feel like you're like almost at war within your mind. Oh, that might be another point actually to make mentally. You might feel like sometimes your mind is not your own. Now, that could that can be kind of concerning. Like, you might be dealing with a spirit at that point, but it could also be witchcraft. So I'm not going to go too much into detail with any of these points. But yeah, so anger, emotionally, irritation. Emotionalism in general, feeling like just very, maybe one moment you're a little bit angry, you're a little bit irritated, maybe you're crying, something like that, something that we might consider like, oh, that person's like bipolar or something like that. Like, maybe, but also maybe not, no grip on your emotions could be an emotional sign that you're dealing with witchcraft. That's why it's actually important to really regulate your emotions as Christians. This is something that I don't think is quite talked about enough, although maybe now it is actually, like, there's so much push on mental health and all that stuff, but seriously, it's really important. And just because you're seeking spiritual understanding, knowledge, edification, all that, doesn't necessarily mean that you're dealing with the mental. In fact, the two things don't necessarily go hand in hand. You can have understanding of things spiritually, but still be very emotionally immature. And that's really unwise if you want to take this stuff seriously. And you want to grow in your walk with God and everything. So that's mental and emotional. Physical. Let me deal with spiritual, actually. So spiritually, what this can look like would be, spiritual. Fatigue. And this will be in more than one category, but fatigue, especially when it comes to going to church, praying, spending time with God, that sort of a thing. Like, you just can't really bring yourself to do it or stick with it for very long. That it could be a number of things, because it could just be a discipline issue within yourself. But it can very well be an attack, especially if, like, you're fine most of the time, except when it's like, okay, we gotta go to church. Oh man, I'm so tired. Like, it's just unreal. I have experienced that. I don't know if it was with church. Maybe it was. I can't recall, but I've experienced that where it's just like an insane amount of tiredness, like straight up fatigue, where it's like I cannot even keep my eyes open. I feel drugged, but I'm not actually, like, able to go to sleep. And it only shows up, like right before I want to pray, or right before I want to go to church, or right before I want to go to Bible study, or something like that, So, yeah, that could be a sign that you're under attack spiritually and that you're dealing with witchcraft. Just realized that there are certain ways in which, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but there are certain ways in which witchcraft can afflict you that demonic entities can't, or at least won't. Typically, I'm not going to say that a spirit can't make you fatigued like that, especially excuse me, if there's some health issue. But that would be more likely a sign of witchcraft than it would be a spirit. So fatigue is one. Closely related would just be like a lack of motivation, lack of drive. It's a big one, actually. Just, feeling just empty. Those are the only two that I can think of at the moment right now. When we're talking about, wait, are we talking about spiritual or physical? Oh my goodness. We were talking about spiritual, weren't we? Yeah. So, sorry, fatigue. Yeah, lack of motivation. I think those are the two biggest ones when it comes to being attacked spiritually. Though there are definitely other ones. Maybe by the time I finish this, I can recall some other ones. Physically, same thing, same couple of things. But also with physical, it could be if you, how do I say this? If you're dealing with someone else, you may notice them not being maybe like quite themselves, and that can look obviously a number of different ways, but especially if they're more agitated than normal, or basically all the signs that I said before, but like you're dealing with someone else. I mentioned an example of having a back and forth with someone who was being attacked that at the time, to be honest, I couldn't tell. It wasn't until after that I could tell, and it was only by the Lord that I was able to discern it. Excuse me. And how it looked was, it was like they were arguing with me, but like, it's hard to explain, to be honest, but they weren't like fully there, if that makes sense. Like, it was like, they almost were being forced to argue. I don't know how to explain it, but it was a very weird situation. It wasn't like a normal, back and forth, and I was just like, what is going on here? Like, why is this even a issue? And then like later I realized, oh shoot, like this was not normal because they were under attack. And it was like everything that they were saying, it like, I don't want to say it didn't make sense, but there was a lot of logic missing, a lot. And it was like, or like they would say something one moment that would contradict the very next thing that they would say, and it's like, what? But that's what happens sometimes when you're under attack. It will manipulate your mind and make you forgetful and all this stuff, to where it's like there's no logic in what you're saying. Now, to the average carnal man, they probably won't see the lack of logic, to be honest. It's not something that I'm seeing like intellectually or even logically, I guess. It would just be by the Spirit. So I would look out for that if you're dealing with someone and it's like, you know, you want to know if you need to pray for them or how to deal with them or whatever the case is. If they just don't seem like themselves, that's a very good chance that they could be afflicted spiritually. More specifically, it could be witchcraft. Physically also, there may be certain environments that you go into and there's just an overwhelming like negative feeling or just something is off. Maybe when you're there, you may feel like you don't have clarity of mind. This actually is situational. I should have specified. This is more in the category of not physical, I suppose, but like situational if you're dealing with a situation, but whatever. Could go either way. You may feel very much like, yeah, like you just have that brain fog or memory issues or whatever when you step into a certain environment. It could be a sign of witchcraft. Sickness that shows up out of nowhere, physically speaking, could be a sign of witchcraft. Now, situational. I suppose could encompass all those things, but also situational can look like the spiritual. Spiritual can look like situational. Because obviously as your spirit is affected, it will affect the situations around you. So one thing to look out for with that is oh, I just had it, dang it. What was it? Dang, I just lost it. That's annoying. Oh Lord Jesus, help me. Okay, dang, and I told myself too I should write this down, but I'm like, no, it's okay. I got it. Oh man, yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say as far as like, oh, situational. Okay, so if you find yourself, and I've talked about this before, but if you find yourself going through the same pattern over and over and over, and it doesn't really make sense. Well, first of all, you have to even recognize, okay, I'm going through the same thing over and over, because a lot of times we will go through this, we will handle things without God, repeating the same thing over and over, and it's like, oh, let me just try this, let me just try this, let me, like, for instance, okay, could be like dating. That could be like a really, really common one. It's like, oh, that guy wasn't the right guy for me, let me try this one. That guy wasn't the right guy for me, let me try this one. That guy would eventually, yeah, you might find someone that works out for you, but there's a way in which God wants you to go about it. There's a way in which that will bring rest, that it's not, okay, doing the same thing and expecting a different result, right? So we have to first recognize that we are even doing the same thing over and over and over. And if we examine our situations, we may find that we're going through the same situation and we can't get ahead. Now, when you find yourself in that situation and it doesn't make sense, you're either dealing with the Spirit of God trying to get your attention. Enemy, the enemy that has you trapped under some curse operating in your life somewhere, afflicting you. Or witchcraft, which also is the enemy, but it's, you know, a different breed, I guess. And if that's the case, that's obviously not good. And you need to come out of that, otherwise the situation will never change. You'll just continue and continue and continue. And or I should say, one of the ways to look out for this would be not only like you're going through the same situation, but it just doesn't make sense as to why you're not able to get ahead or things aren't changing. For instance, you know, I said the thing about dating, but also another one could be like, a common one would be, you know, you're working 3 jobs and you still just are barely making it. That's a problem. Nowadays, I think we finally let go of the hustle culture idea, but for a while that was really like a thing. And it's just the reality that there are a lot of people right now, and especially in California, who are working like so much, way more than full time, and can't even afford to find a place to live. So that's a problem. Now, I'm not saying that that necessarily means that it's witchcraft, no, but it could be. That may be part of your circumstances, especially if you've tried multiple things and nothing has changed for you. So being bound in your situations would be a sign of witchcraft. I don't think there's any other situational things that would mean you're dealing with witchcraft. And this obviously goes along with spiritual too. If you're afflicted with witchcraft, how it can show up spiritually would be that you're in the same place. You know, you like, I don't know. You've been trying to think of an example. I honestly cannot think of an example off the top of my head, but there's no elevation, you know. You're just in the same place, not achieving anything, not doing anything for God, not, you know, not able to move above a certain level, whatever the case is. So that could be situational. That could also be spiritual. That could also even be physical. Like if you're working at a job and you're being afflicted by witchcraft, like, or I'll say like, could be your boss actually being afflicted, and you're supposed to get a raise, but your boss is like, you know, for whatever reason, they can't piece it together, but they just don't want to give you that raise. There's no real good reason why, but they just, no. Could be spiritual. Could be the influence of a spirit. It could be witchcraft. Another way it can show up, I guess this would be like emotionally, although it could be mentally also, would be irrationality. I kind of touched on this about emotionalism, but yeah, being like kind of irrational is one of the ways you can tell you're dealing with a spirit and or dealing with witchcraft. When there's just no Well, going back to the example I talked about with the argument I was having with someone, that is like, the logic was like, I don't really want to go into the details of it, but the logic was really lacking, and it was just like, this isn't even a rational thought that like a normal person would come to, kind of a thing. Um, that could very well be a sign that you are dealing with witchcraft. I believe that's all the examples that I had for you. So yeah, it can show up emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. It can show up in more than one, or like more than one category, or in one, or whatever. um I believe personally, if you're dealing with like real serious affliction, witchcraft affliction, it will show up in like multiple categories. But hopefully for most of you, if you're dealing with it, it's only on one level, and you can recognize it, deal with it, dismantle that, cancel it in the name of Jesus, and be on your way. People who are dealing with real serious situations where it's afflicting like everything in their life is just basically stopped. You may need deliverance from someone, help with deliverance. It might not be something that you can handle on your own. So that's all I have for you. I hope this helped. I hope this encouraged you. If it did, go ahead and leave a like, and I'll be back with another word. Bye.